Megan Taylor never thought her biggest problem on a Monday morning would be what to pack in a suitcase. Sitting on the bed in her small apartment in Boston's North End, she stared at the letter she'd held in her trembling hands for the 20th time. "Congratulations, you have won an all-expenses-paid trip to Newport, Rhode Island. 4 days and 3 nights at the luxurious Ocean Crest Resort with all meals included." Her grandmother Jean, sitting in her favorite armchair by the window, sipped her tea and watched her granddaughter with amusement. "Megan, are you reading that letter again? You already know what it says," the old woman chuckled, adjusting the shawl on her shoulders. "It's time to be happy, not to worry." "But Grandma, I don't remember entering any contest." Megan shook her head, her brown curls falling across her face. "What if it's a mistake? What if this was meant for someone else? Or what if fate just decided to smile on you?" Jean stood up and walked over to her granddaughter. "Megan, you work like a dog from dawn till dusk. You clean those offices, you run between 3 part-time jobs, and when was the last time you did something for yourself?" Megan sighed. Her grandmother was right. Ever since her parents died 6 years ago, everything had revolved around work and caring for her ailing grandma. The heart medication was expensive, the rent didn't pay itself, and she couldn't even remember the last time she'd gone to the movies. "But what am I going to do in Newport?" she asked, nervously picking at the edge of the letter. "I can't even swim. What if it's some kind of scam? What if—" "Megan!" her grandmother interrupted firmly. "Stop worrying about things that haven't happened yet. Pack your bags and go. It's only 4 days, and I'll be fine." 2 hours later, Megan stood on the platform at South Station with a small, worn-out suitcase and an Amtrak ticket to Rhode Island in her hand. Her heart was pounding. She had never traveled this far alone. She had never seen the ocean properly, not up close. In fact, she'd rarely ventured beyond the Boston city limits. The train departed precisely at 10:15. Megan pressed her face to the window, watching as Boston's brick and steel landscape gave way to suburbs, then forests and marshlands. With every mile, a strange excitement mixed with panic grew inside her. When the train pulled into the station in Kingston an hour later, Megan felt that something had changed. The air was different, fresher with a strange, briny tang she had never smelled before. A taxi took her through winding coastal roads toward Newport. The driver, an older man in a worn Red Sox cap, was talkative. "First time seeing the ocean, hun?" he asked, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. "Yes," Megan answered quietly, her eyes glued to the window. "Oh, you're in for a treat." "The ocean's a funny thing. You either love it at first sight or you're scared of it, but you look like a brave one." "Brave." Megan smiled sadly. If only this man knew how badly her hands were shaking. The Ocean Crest Resort turned out to be an imposing building of cedar shingles and white trim, towering over the beach like a modern fortress. Megan got out of the taxi and stood frozen for a moment, staring at the floor-to-ceiling glass, elegant columns, and liveried doormen. "Is this really the right place?" she whispered to herself. In the lobby, her eyes widened in amazement. Everything gleamed. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, bouquets of fresh lilies on every table. People in expensive suits and designer dresses moved with a quiet confidence, as if this were their natural habitat. Megan looked down at her faded denim jacket and black pants. Her best outfit, which had seemed perfectly fine an hour ago. Now she felt like an intruder. An elegant blonde woman in a navy blue suit stood at the reception desk. "Good morning. My name is Megan Taylor," she said uncertainly. I have a reservation." The receptionist checked the computer and smiled professionally. "Of course, Miss Taylor. Suite 221. Here is your key card. We hope you enjoy your stay." "Suite?" Megan took the card with a trembling hand. There had to be a mistake. The room on the second floor turned out to be larger than her entire Boston apartment. A king-sized bed, a marble bathroom, a minibar, and most importantly, a private balcony with a view of the ocean. Megan walked toward the glass doors leading to the balcony and stopped. For a moment she just stood there, staring through the glass at the vast blue expanse that stretched to the horizon. With trembling hands, she slid the door open, and then it hit her. The smell of the ocean struck her like a physical wave. Salty, briny, so intense it made her head spin. And then she heard it, the rhythmic, hypnotic roar of the waves crashing onto the shore, a sound she had never heard in person before. But the sight was the most overwhelming part. The ocean was enormous, infinite. Megan, who had spent her entire life surrounded by buildings, streets, and rooftops, was now face to face with something so immense her mind couldn't process it. Her knees buckled. "Oh, God!" she whispered, grabbing the balcony railing for support. It's... She couldn't breathe. Her heart hammered against her ribs, and sweat beaded on her forehead. The vast, open space, the endless blue, felt like it was crashing down on her. She felt like a tiny speck in a gigantic alien world. "Help!" she mouthed, though she knew no one could hear her. The panic rose like a tidal wave. Megan stumbled back, tripping on the threshold, but she couldn't tear her eyes away from the sea. It was too big, too foreign, too much. "Ma'am, are you all right?" The voice came from her side. Megan turned her head and saw a tall man in a sharp navy suit walking toward her from the balcony of the adjacent suite. He was in his early 30s, with dark hair slightly tousled by the sea breeze and concerned blue eyes. He swung a leg over the low barrier dividing the balconies and was by her side in a few steps. "Ma'am, you're breathing too fast," he said calmly, but his voice held the authority of someone used to taking charge. "Look at me, not at the ocean." Megan tried to focus on his face, but the world was spinning. I can't. It's too big," she gasped. "I understand," he said gently. "First time seeing the ocean." She nodded, still panting. "It's okay." "Give me your hand," he said, extending his right hand to her. "My name is Thomas." Instinctively, she grabbed his hand. It was warm, strong, and grounding. The moment their skin touched, something strange happened. The panic didn't vanish completely, but it receded, becoming manageable. "Megan," she whispered. "That's a beautiful name," he smiled. "Megan, can you do something very simple with me? Just look into my eyes and breathe with me. In and out. In and out." His voice was deep, calm. His eyes were an unusual shade of blue, the kind you could get lost in. Megan tried to match her breathing to his, still clutching his hand. "Better?" he asked after a moment. "A little," she admitted, blushing with embarrassment. "I'm sorry. I'm acting like a child." "No, don't apologize," he shook his head. "Anxiety responses to new situations are completely normal, especially when you encounter something as overwhelming as the ocean for the first time." He spoke like an educated man, using words that sounded like they came from a psychology textbook, but there was also genuine care in his voice. Do you often rescue people having panic attacks on balconies?" she asked, trying to smile. He let out a quiet laugh. "I have to admit, this is a first for me," he said. "But I have experience with high-stress situations at work." "What kind of work do you do?" "I'm in, management," he replied after a brief pause. "And you?" I clean offices," she said automatically, then blushed again. Why had she told him that? He would think she was... "That's hard work," he said with respect. "Demanding and underappreciated." His response caught her off guard. She had expected disdain, or at best, polite silence, not validation. "You're very kind," she said softly. "And you're very brave," he replied. "Coming to the ocean by yourself, when you've never seen it before, takes courage." They were still holding hands. Megan suddenly realized it and quickly pulled back. "I'm better now, thank you," she said, her face burning. "You're welcome," he smiled. "Will you be here for a few days?" 4 days, 3 nights, she answered. "And you?" "For a while," he said evasively. Maybe I could show you around town tomorrow. Newport is a beautiful city, and I know it quite well." Megan felt her heart leap. When was the last time a man had asked her out? And a man like this, elegant, kind, handsome. "I don't want to be a bother," she said uncertainly. "You wouldn't be," he assured her quickly. "I'd be very happy if you'd accept." "In that case, yes," she replied, unable to stop a smile from spreading across her face. "I'd like that." "Wonderful," his face lit up. "Shall we meet in the lobby tomorrow at 10? "Okay." He stood there for another moment, as if he wanted to add something, then just nodded. "I'll see you tomorrow, Megan. See you tomorrow, Thomas." He swung his leg back over the barrier to his own balcony and disappeared into his suite. Megan was left alone, still feeling the warmth of his hand on her skin. Slowly, she turned back toward the ocean. It was still vast and overwhelming, but now it didn't seem so terrifying. Maybe it was because she wasn't alone anymore. Maybe it was because someone had understood. Or maybe it was because his eyes were the exact color of a wave when the sun hits it at just the right angle. "What did I just do?" she thought, stepping back inside the suite. "I made a date with a complete stranger. Grandma would have a field day." But when she went to bed that night, for the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about the next day's chores or the bills she had to pay. She was thinking about blue eyes and a warm hand that had helped her find her breath. Outside the window, the ocean roared, but it no longer scared her. It sounded like a lullaby. Thomas Sinclair stood on his balcony, looking out at the dark sea. He had his phone pressed to his ear. "Yes, Mom, everything's under control." "The hotel will be ready for the grand opening next week," he said, running his fingers through his hair. "No, I don't need you to come down. I can handle it." "Thomas, you always take everything on yourself." His mother's voice was laced with concern, even through the phone. "When was the last time you took a break?" "Mom!" "Don't mom me," Helena Sinclair interrupted. "You're 32 years old. You have a hotel empire that's thriving, but are you happy?" Thomas sighed. It was the one question he preferred not to ask himself too often. "I'm satisfied with my accomplishments. That's not the same as happiness." "Listen, Mom, I have to go. I have an important meeting tomorrow." It wasn't a complete lie. He did have a meeting tomorrow with a girl who had brown curls and frightened eyes, who reacted to the ocean as if she'd seen something both miraculous and terrifying at the same time. Ever since he'd helped her, he couldn't stop thinking about her. He was used to the women in his circle, polished, self-assured, often more interested in his bank account than in him. Megan was different. She was real. "I clean offices," she had said, as if she were ashamed of it. And he, who had spent his life surrounded by people trying to impress him, found something refreshing in her honesty. Except he hadn't told her who he really was. And now he had a problem. The Ocean Crest Resort was his hotel. It was set to open to the public tomorrow, with a grand opening gala planned for the following week, complete with press, celebrities, and investors. He wasn't here as a guest, but as the owner, personally overseeing every last detail. And Megan thought he was just some other hotel guest. "What have I gotten myself into?" he thought, glancing toward her balcony. The light in her suite had gone out half an hour ago. Tomorrow he would have to tell her the truth, although maybe not right away. Maybe he could spend one day with her as a normal guy, without the weight of his name and his fortune. One day, he said to himself. One normal day. What could possibly happen? If he had known what tomorrow would bring, he probably wouldn't have slept so soundly. Megan woke up at 6 in the morning, just like she had every day for the past 6 years. For a moment, she lay disoriented, staring at a ceiling she didn't recognize. It was only when she heard the sound of the ocean outside her window that it all came rushing back. The hotel, the ocean, the panic, and Thomas. She shot out of bed and ran to the bathroom mirror. Her reflection looked like it had been through a hurricane. Hair in a tangled mess, dark circles under her eyes, a crease from the pillow on her cheek. "Oh, no, no, no," she muttered, trying to tame her curls. "What am I going to say to him? What am I going to wear?" Her wardrobe in the suitcase looked even more pathetic in the daylight. 2 pairs of jeans, 3 T-shirts from a department store, 1 sweater, and her only decent shoes. a pair of white sneakers that had seen better days. In the cafe on the ground floor, where she went for breakfast at 7:30, she felt like an imposter at a masquerade ball. The guests were dressed like they'd stepped out of a magazine. Women in silk blouses with designer handbags, men in shirts that probably cost more than her monthly salary. "Good morning. May I get you anything for breakfast?" a waitress in an elegant uniform asked. Megan looked at the menu and felt her head spin. The prices were astronomical. Is breakfast included with the room?" she asked quietly. "Of course, ma'am. A full continental breakfast, unlimited." Relief washed over Megan like a warm wave. At least she wouldn't have to pay for food. When she went down to the lobby at 10, her heart was beating so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. Thomas was already there, standing by a large potted palm and scrolling through his phone. When he saw her, he smiled so brightly that she felt butterflies in her stomach. Today, he was dressed differently. Instead of the elegant suit, he wore dark jeans and a navy blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He looked more normal, more approachable. "Good morning, Megan," he said, walking toward her. "Did you sleep well?" "Like a baby," she lied. In reality, she tossed and turned until 3 in the morning, thinking about his blue eyes. "And you?" "Pretty well," he replied, though the shadows under his eyes suggested otherwise. "Ready to explore Newport?" "Ready," she nodded, trying to look confident. As they were leaving the hotel, Thomas stopped by the front desk. "Ashley, if anyone is looking for me, I'll be unavailable until this evening," he said to the receptionist. "Of course, Mr. S." The receptionist began to reply, but Thomas quickly cut her off. "Thanks. Have a good day." Megan didn't notice the odd exchange. She was too busy taking in the bustle of people on the street outside the hotel. "How about we start with the cliff walk?" Thomas suggested, offering her his arm. "It's just a short trolley ride away." "A trolley?" she asked, surprised. "I thought maybe a taxi." "The trolley is the best way to see the city," he assured her. "You get to see real life, not just hotels and tourist traps." On the trolley, Thomas seemed surprisingly at ease for someone who looked accustomed to luxury. He talked to her about everything: the architecture of the mansions they passed, the history of Newport, the best places to get coffee. He was intelligent, witty, and most importantly, he listened to her answers as if they genuinely interested him. "So you've lived alone with your grandmother for 6 years?" he asked, after she told him about her family situation. "Yes," she nodded. "After my parents' accident, it was just the two of us. Grandma has a heart condition, so someone has to take care of her." "That must be hard," he said softly. "The responsibility, the work, the caretaking." "It is sometimes," she admitted honestly. "But my grandmother is wonderful. She's the one who convinced me to take this trip. Smart woman." "What about you? Do you have family?" Thomas hesitated for a moment. "I have a mother," he said finally. "I lost my father when I was 21. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, instinctively touching his arm. "Thank you," he smiled sadly. He really wanted me to take over the family business. Sometimes I wonder if he'd be proud of me." "I'm sure he would be," she said without hesitation. "Yesterday, you helped a complete stranger. And today you're spending your whole day showing a tourist around the city. That says everything about you." He looked at her as if she'd said something extraordinary. "You know what?" he said suddenly. "I feel like doing something crazy." "Crazy?" "Follow me," he said, taking her hand and pulling her toward one of the souvenir shops along Thames Street. "I want to buy you something from Newport." "But I don't need—" "You don't need it, but I want to," he interrupted. "Please, let me do something nice for you." The shop was chaotic. Tourists picking out magnets, mugs, and T-shirts. Thomas led her through the aisles like a man on a mission. "This," he said, pointing to a display case of silver jewelry. "Something nautical is a Newport classic. Please, pick something." "Thomas, this is too expensive," she protested, looking at the price tags. "Not for me," he said firmly. And then, as if realizing how that sounded for someone who claimed to work in management, he added quickly, "I mean, I saved up for this trip. Megan chose the smallest pendant, a delicate silver sand dollar on a simple chain. As Thomas paid with his card, she noticed the cashier give her a strange look, but she didn't think much of it. "May I?" he asked when they were back outside. She nodded, pushing her hair aside. As he fastened the chain around her neck, his fingers brushed gently against her skin. A shiver went down her spine. "It looks beautiful on you," he said softly, not moving away. They were so close she could see tiny gold flecks in his blue eyes. If he leaned in just a few inches... "Excuse me!" a tourist shouted, barging between them with a camera. "Could you take a picture of us?" The moment was broken. Thomas stepped back, smiling politely at the man. "Of course." After taking the photo for the tourist couple, they continued down the crowded street. Megan could still feel the spot on her neck where his fingers had touched her. "Do you have experience with photography?" she asked, just to say something. "A little," he replied. "At work, we often have to document various things." "What exactly is it you do?" "Yesterday you said management, but that's pretty vague." Thomas was visibly flustered. "I manage projects," he said uncertainly. "Large projects. Construction." "How interesting," Megan brightened. "That must be a very responsible job, and well-paying if you can afford a vacation at a hotel like that." "Yes, well," he mumbled, clearly uncomfortable. "Where do you live?" "In New York," he answered quickly. That at least was true. "New York," she sighed with admiration. "I've always dreamed of seeing New York. They say there's so much work, so many opportunities." "It has its moments," he said evasively. "But sometimes you long for a simpler life, without the constant stress, the pressure." "You must be joking," she laughed. "I'd give anything for a little of that kind of stress, for the chance to worry about something more than whether there's enough money for my grandma's medicine." Thomas stopped and looked at her with an expression that seemed to truly see her for the first time. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I shouldn't complain about my life." "No, I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to be rude. It's just, sometimes I wonder what it's like to live without constant financial worries." "You know what?" he said suddenly. "Today, neither of us is going to worry about money. Today, we're just Thomas and Megan exploring a beautiful city. Deal?" She smiled. "Deal." They spent the next few hours exploring. Thomas proved to be an excellent guide. He knew the history of every Gilded Age mansion, told anecdotes about the city's founders, and showed her hidden spots that most tourists missed. At the International Tennis Hall of Fame, Megan paused to read about the sport's early champions. Thomas stood beside her in silence, and when she was done, he gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "They would be proud of you," he said softly, referring to her parents. "How do you know? I just have to look at how you care for your grandmother, how hard you work, how bravely you face new situations. That takes character." No one had ever said anything like that to her. She felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. At lunch, in a small clam shack on the wharf, Thomas ordered with the ease of a local, recommending the best chowder and lobster rolls. "How do you know Newport so well?" she asked, enjoying a delicious lobster roll. "I come here a lot," he answered evasively. "For work." "Managing construction projects in Newport." "You could say that." He nodded, clearly uncomfortable. After lunch, they walked along the waterfront. The sun was shining, people were sitting in outdoor cafes, and a young couple was feeding swans by the docks. Everything seemed perfect. "Megan," Thomas said, stopping by a railing, "I want to tell you something." Her heart leaped into her throat. Was this it? Was he going to say that he... "Yesterday when I met you," he began, looking out at the water, "it's been a long time since I've felt so natural with anyone. Usually people want something from me, or they're trying to impress me, or what? Or they're interested in things that have nothing to do with me as a person," he finished quietly. "I don't understand." He turned to face her. "You just talk to me, like a normal person, and that's refreshing." Because you are a normal person, she said, surprised. Why would I treat you any differently? He looked at her for a long, intense moment. You're right, he said finally. Maybe you're right. When they took the trolley back to the hotel at 5 in the afternoon, they were both tired but happy. Megan felt as if she had lived the most beautiful day of her life. Thank you, she said, as they stood in the hotel lobby. This was a wonderful day. For me too, he replied. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe we could go to the beach. I'd love that, she smiled. I'll see you tomorrow then. He leaned in and kissed her on the cheek. His lips were warm and soft. Megan felt her head spin. See you, she whispered. As he disappeared into the elevator, she stood in the lobby for a moment longer, touching the cheek he had kissed. The silver pendant rested warmly against her skin. This can't be real, she thought. Things like this don't happen to girls like me. But as she walked to her floor, she could still smell his cologne and feel the warmth of his lips on her skin. Thomas entered the penthouse suite and was immediately surrounded by his team. Mr. Sinclair, the head chef, wants to finalize the menu for Saturday's opening, the hotel manager said, following him with a notepad. And the interior designer is asking for final approval on the restaurant decor. Later, Thomas said, loosening his shirt. Everything later. But sir, these are important decisions. I said later, he snapped. Then, seeing the manager's startled expression, softened his tone. I'm sorry, Mark, I'm tired. Can we push this to the evening? Of course, sir. When he was alone, Thomas stood in front of the mirror and looked at his reflection. The man who had walked around Newport today, eating lobster rolls at a clam shack and buying silver pendants, looked different from the owner of a hotel empire. He looked happier. His phone rang. The screen read, Mom. Hello, Mom. Thomas, how are the preparations for the opening going? Everything's on schedule, he replied automatically. Good, good. And how are you feeling? You're not overworking yourself? No, Mom. Actually, I had a very good day today. Oh, that's nice to hear. Did something special happen? Thomas glanced toward the balcony, from where he could see Megan's. I met a girl, he said finally. A girl? His mother's voice was filled with curiosity and hope. Tell me everything. She's different from the women I usually meet. Different in what way? She's real, Mom, honest. She doesn't put on a show. She doesn't try to impress me. She's just herself. She sounds wonderful. And what circle is she from? Thomas hesitated. Not ours, he admitted finally. Thomas, Mom, she doesn't know who I am, he interrupted her. She thinks I'm just a regular hotel guest who works for some construction company. The silence on the other end lasted for a long moment. Thomas, his mother finally said in a very serious tone, that's not a good idea. Why not? Because when she finds out the truth, she'll feel deceived. And if she doesn't find out the truth, the relationship will be built on a lie. Either way, it ends badly. But Mom, for the first time in years, I feel... I know, honey, she interrupted gently. But you can't build a relationship on a lie. Tell her the truth. What if she walks away? Then she wasn't the right girl for you, his mother replied. But if she stays, you'll know she loves you for you, not for your position or your wealth. After ending the call, Thomas stood on the balcony for a long time, looking at the ocean. His mother was right, as always. He had to tell Megan the truth. But not tomorrow. Tomorrow, he wanted one more day of being just Thomas, the guy who walks on the beach with a girl who looks at him like he's a normal human being. One more day, he thought. Just one more day, and then I'll tell her everything. Outside, the sun was setting over the Atlantic, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. If Megan had looked out on her balcony at that moment, she would have seen him standing by his railing, lost in thought and looking in her direction. But Megan was in the shower, singing for the first time in years, because she felt like the heroine of a romantic movie whose wildest dream was coming true. Megan woke with a smile on her face. For the first time in years, she wasn't awakened by anxiety about the coming day, but by excitement. The sun was shining outside, the ocean was as calm as a mirror, and she was about to spend another day with the most wonderful man she had ever met. She chose her best blouse, a white one with delicate lace at the neckline, and the only skirt she had brought. It wasn't fashionable or expensive, but it was clean and she felt good in it. The silver pendant from Thomas gleamed on her neck like a small sun. When she went down to the lobby at 10 o'clock sharp, Thomas was already waiting for her. Today he was wearing beige chinos and a white linen shirt. He looked like he'd stepped out of an ad for expensive cologne. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, approaching her with a smile. "Ready to meet the real beach? Can you ever be ready for something you've never seen?" she replied, feeling the butterflies in her stomach. "In that case, I'll be your guide." He offered his arm. "Do you trust me?" "I do," she answered without hesitation, and only a moment later did she realize how true that was. They walked out through the glass doors directly onto the hotel's terrace, and from there down a set of stairs leading straight to the sand. Megan stopped on the last step. The beach was nearly empty at this hour, just a few people strolling along the shoreline, and a handful of seagulls scavenging for breakfast leftovers. The sand was pale, almost white, and the ocean today was a grayish-green color with silver reflections. "This is," she began, but couldn't find the words. "It's okay," Thomas said gently. "You're prepared this time, and besides, I'm here." They stepped onto the sand. Megan immediately took off her sandals to feel the sand between her toes. It was warm and soft, completely different from what she had imagined. "Oh, it's hot," she laughed, hopping on one foot. "The sun warms it up," Thomas explained, taking off his own shoes. "Come on, I'll show you the best spot." He led her toward an empty section of the beach where two elegant lounge chairs sat under an umbrella. Megan eyed them suspiciously. "This doesn't look like a public beach," she said uncertainly. This is the hotel's section," Thomas replied, avoiding her gaze. "Guests can use it. But it looks very exclusive. Maybe we should go somewhere else?" No, he assured her quickly. "It's fine, I checked earlier." This was true, though not the whole truth. Thomas had indeed checked. He had ordered the staff to prepare a private area on the beach, officially for a very important hotel guest, but unofficially for himself and Megan. They settled into the lounge chairs. Megan couldn't tear her eyes away from the ocean. "It's so alive," she said with awe. "It's constantly moving, breathing." "I've never thought of it that way," Thomas admitted. "But you're right. It's like a giant living organism. Have you been coming to the ocean since you were a kid?" "No," he shook his head. "I was born and raised in New York. The ocean is a relatively new thing for me, too." "Really?" She was surprised. "But yesterday you said you come here often." Thomas felt himself blush. "Yes, but for work," he mumbled. "It's not the same as relaxing." "I get it," she nodded. "Work is work." They lay in silence, listening to the sound of the waves. Megan closed her eyes and for the first time in years felt something that could be described as peace. She wasn't thinking about bills, about her grandmother, about the next day's responsibilities. There was only the sound of the ocean, the warmth of the sun, and the knowledge that beside her lay a man with whom she felt safe. "Megan," Thomas said softly. I want to ask you something." "Go ahead." Have you ever thought about changing your life? About doing something completely different?" She opened her eyes and looked at him. He was lying with his head propped on his hand, looking at her with a strange intensity. "I think about it all the time," she admitted honestly. "But dreams are one thing, and reality is another. I can't leave my grandmother. I don't have a degree. I don't have money for any kind of change. And what if you did? What if money wasn't an issue? And that's kind of like asking, what would you do if you won the lottery?" She laughed sadly. "I always dreamed of finishing college. I wanted to be a teacher." "A teacher?" There was genuine interest in his voice. "Yes, an English teacher. I loved to read, to write. In high school, my teacher said I had a talent for it. But then my parents died in the accident and my grandmother got sick, and you were left with everything on your own." "Yes," she nodded. but I don't regret it. My grandmother gave me everything she could. Now, it's my turn to take care of her." Thomas was silent for a long moment. "You're an extraordinary woman," he said finally. "Why?" "Because despite everything that's happened to you, you still dream. You still have hope. And you, don't you dream?" Thomas sighed. "I used to," he admitted. "But the more you achieve, the less room there is for dreams. Everything becomes a plan, a strategy, another goal to accomplish." "That sounds lonely." "It is lonely," he said honestly, then met her gaze. "But since I met you, for the first time in years, I don't feel alone." His words hung in the air between them. Megan felt her heart race. "Thomas," she began uncertainly. "I know we've only known each other for 2 days," he interrupted quickly. "I know this is crazy, but I can't stop thinking about you." He leaned toward her. Their faces were now just inches apart. "I can't stop thinking about you either," she whispered. He kissed her gently, uncertainly, as if asking for permission. His lips were warm and soft, tasting of sun and sea. Megan closed her eyes, and for the first time in her life, felt what it meant to be completely and utterly happy. When they pulled apart, they were both smiling. "That was—" Megan started. "Beautiful," Thomas finished. She took his hand and intertwined their fingers. They fit together perfectly. "Can I tell you something crazy?" she asked. "Please do. I feel like we've known each other for years, like you're the one." Thomas felt a pang of guilt. She was so honest, so open, and he was lying to her face. "Megan," he began seriously, "there are things about me you don't know." "What things?" "My job, my situation. It's more complicated than I told you." "Complicated in what way?" Before he could answer, they heard voices. A group of men in suits was walking down the beach. They looked like businessmen. One of them, an older bald man, spotted Thomas and waved. "Thomas, we were just looking for you." Thomas cursed under his breath. "Who's that?" Megan asked. That's a colleague from work," Thomas answered, clearly stressed. "Excuse me, I have to talk to them. It'll just be a minute." He got up and walked toward the group. Megan was left alone on the lounge chair, watching him from a distance. She noticed his posture change. He stood straighter, more authoritatively. The men around him behaved with deference, as if he were their superior. The conversation lasted a few minutes. Megan couldn't hear the words, but she saw Thomas giving what looked like orders, while the other men nodded and jotted things down in notepads. "Who were they?" she asked when he returned. "Colleagues from the construction firm," he said quickly. "A problem with one of the projects. But they acted like you were their boss." It's complicated," he mumbled. "Megan, maybe we should get some lunch." She was clearly unsettled, but she didn't want to press him. "Okay," she agreed. In the hotel restaurant, as they waited for their food, Megan couldn't hold back any longer. "Thomas, are you not telling me the whole truth about your job?" "Why do you think that?" "Because those men on the beach, they treated you like a very important person. And yesterday in the shop, the cashier gave me a funny look when you paid with your card. And here in the hotel, the staff acts differently around you than around other guests." Thomas was silent, fiddling with his fork. "Thomas," she said quietly, "are you more than just an employee at a construction company?" "Why does it matter?" he asked, avoiding her gaze. "Because if you're lying to me about something so basic, what else aren't you telling me?" "I'm not lying," he protested. "I'm just not telling you everything." "That's the same thing," she said calmly, but her voice was laced with disappointment. "Megan, please trust me, I'll tell you everything, but not now, not here." "When?" "Soon. I promise." Lunch passed in a tense silence. Megan was quiet, lost in thought. Thomas tried to return to their earlier light-hearted mood, but he could feel that something between them had shifted. After the meal, they went back to the beach, but the magic was gone. Megan lay on the lounge chair with her eyes closed, but Thomas knew she wasn't sleeping. Her body was tense, her breathing uneven. "Megan," he finally said, "can I ask you for something?" "What is it?" "Trust me for one more day. Tomorrow evening I will explain everything to you. Everything." She opened her eyes and looked at him. "You promise?" "I promise. And what if it turns out tomorrow that what you tell me is so bad I'll want to leave?" "That will be your right," he answered quietly. "But I hope you'll trust me and give me a chance to explain." Megan was silent for a long time, staring at the ocean. "Fine," she said at last. "One day. Thank you. But, Thomas," she added, looking him straight in the eye, "if you've lied to me about something important, if you're married or have a girlfriend or—" "I'm not married," he interrupted quickly. "I don't have a girlfriend. And what's happening between us is real. I promise you that." "All right," she nodded. "I believe you." They spent the rest of the day more peacefully. Thomas tried to be himself, not the owner of a hotel empire, but a normal man falling in love with an extraordinary woman. They talked about books they liked, places they wanted to see, childhood dreams. As the sun began to set, they went for a walk along the water's edge. Megan collected seashells, and Thomas watched how her hair billowed in the wind. She was beautiful in that simple, natural way that required no makeup or expensive clothes. "Megan," he said as they stood where the waves gently washed over the shore. "Yes? No matter what happens tomorrow, I want you to know that these days with you have been the happiest moments I've had in years." "For me too," she replied softly. He kissed her again, this time for longer, more passionately. Megan wrapped her arms around him, feeling the whole world disappear. When they pulled apart, they both knew this was more than just a vacation romance. This was something real, something important, and that was precisely why tomorrow's confession would be all the more painful. That night, Thomas stood on his balcony, talking to his mother on the phone. "Did you tell her?" Helena Sinclair asked. "No," he admitted, "but I will tomorrow, for sure." "Thomas, the longer you wait, the worse it will be." "I know, Mom. But she's so different from all the women I've known. She's afraid she's not good enough for someone with money, and I'm afraid that when she finds out who I really am, she'll think I intentionally deceived her." "But you did." "Not intentionally," he protested. I just wanted to be treated like a normal person." "I understand, honey. But she has a right to know who she's involved with." "I'll tell her tomorrow," he promised. "Tomorrow it will all be over, either for good or for bad. But she will know the truth." After hanging up, he looked toward Megan's balcony. The light in her room was off, but he knew she was awake, just like him. Tomorrow everything would change. The only question was, for better or for worse. In her room, Megan lay in bed thinking about Thomas. Something about his behavior didn't add up, but when he kissed her, when he looked at her with those blue eyes, all her doubts vanished. "Tomorrow, everything will be clear," she told herself. "Tomorrow, I'll know if I can trust him." She didn't yet know that tomorrow her world would be turned upside down. Megan woke at dawn with a strange knot of anxiety in her stomach. Today, she was supposed to learn the truth about Thomas, and she wasn't sure she was ready for it. Through the window, she could see hotel staff setting up structures on the beach. White tents, tables, chairs. When she went down for breakfast, the atmosphere in the hotel was strangely electric. People in navy uniforms were bustling about, decorators were arranging flowers, and a large sign had been placed in the lobby that read, "Grand Opening, the Ocean Crest Resort." "Good morning," she said to the receptionist. "What's going on? Is there an event?" "Oh, yes," the young woman replied enthusiastically. "It's the official grand opening of the hotel today. A huge gala for VIPs, the press, celebrities. It's going to be an amazing event." "Opening?" Megan was confused. "But the hotel is already open. I've been staying here for 3 days." "Yes, but that was a soft opening, just for select guests," the receptionist explained. "Today is the official inauguration. Mr. Sinclair himself will be cutting the ribbon." "Mr. Sinclair?" "The owner of the hotel. A young millionaire, very handsome," the receptionist giggled. "Apparently he's come all the way from New York just for the occasion." Megan felt a strange tightness in her chest. Sinclair wasn't the most common name, but— "What's the owner's first name?" she asked with feigned indifference. Thomas, the receptionist replied. Thomas Sinclair. I heard he took over the company after his father passed away a few years ago. He has a whole hotel empire now. The world tilted around Megan. The receptionist was still chattering on about luxury hotels all over the country, but Megan wasn't listening anymore. Thomas Sinclair, the owner of the hotel, a millionaire. The same Thomas who had bought her a silver pendant, eaten clam chowder with her at a small shack, and talked about problems at his construction firm. Excuse me, she interrupted the receptionist. Could you show me a picture of this owner? Of course. The young woman pointed to an elegant framed photo on the wall behind the desk. There's a picture of the entire Sinclair family. Megan walked closer and felt her legs go weak. In the photo, dressed in an elegant suit with a professional smile, stood Thomas. Thomas. Beneath the photo, a plaque read, Thomas Sinclair, CEO, Sinclair Hotels Group. Is everything all right? The receptionist asked. You look pale. Yes. Megan choked out. I have to go. She ran to the elevator, then down the hall to her room. She slammed the door shut and leaned against it, breathing heavily. It had all been a lie. His job, his situation, his interest in her, all of it. He was a millionaire, the owner of the entire hotel, and she was just a simple cleaning lady who had believed in a fairy tale about Prince Charming. Why? She thought, feeling tears stream down her face. Why would he play a joke on me like this? Was it some kind of game? A bet about the naive girl from the city? She sat on the bed and tried to think logically. Maybe it wasn't a joke. Maybe he actually liked her but was ashamed of her in front of his friends. Maybe that's why he hid the truth. That was even worse than a joke. Her phone rang. The screen read, Thomas. She didn't answer. He called 3 more times. The 4th time he sent a text. Megan, we need to talk. It's not what you think. Please, just give me a chance to explain. She turned off her phone. For the next few hours she sat in her room, trying to decide what to do. She could pack her bags and leave without a word. She could stay and confront him. She could... A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Megan? Thomas's voice came through the door. Please open up. I know you found out. Go away, she replied. You have an important event today. Cutting ribbons, posing for pictures with important people. No event is more important than you. Don't lie, she said sharply. You've lied enough. Megan, I'm begging you, 5 minutes. After that, if you want, I will personally drive you to the station. She was silent for a long moment, then opened the door. Thomas stood in the hallway in the same suit she had seen in the photograph. He looked tired and distraught. Can I come in? She nodded and stepped aside. How much of it was real? She asked without preamble. Anything? All of it was real, he said quickly. My feelings, our conversations, what's happening between us. But not your job, not your life situation, not the reason you're at this hotel. No, he admitted quietly. That was the only lie. The only one. She laughed bitterly. Thomas, you own this hotel. That's not one lie. That's a fundamental deception. I know, he said, running his hands through his hair. I know how this looks. But I can explain. Then explain, she said, crossing her arms over her chest. Why did a rich hotel owner decide to play a prank on a simple cleaning lady? It wasn't a prank, he said firmly. It was never a prank. Then what was it? Thomas sighed and sat down in the chair by the window. When I first saw you on the balcony, I wasn't there as a guest. I was there as the owner, inspecting my new hotel. I had spent the whole day listening to reports, making decisions, talking to investors. I was tired of being who I am. And then I saw you, panicking at the sight of the ocean. And I forgot about everything else. I wasn't thinking about money or the hotel or business. I was only thinking about helping you. And when you thanked me and told me about your job, for the first time in years, someone treated me like a normal person. So you decided to play at being a normal person at the expense of my feelings. No! He stood up abruptly. I decided to get to know you as Thomas, not as the hotel owner. I wanted you to fall for me, not for my bank account. And it never occurred to you that this should have been my decision, that I had the right to know the truth and decide for myself whether I liked you for your money or without it. He was silent because he had no answer to that. Thomas, she said more quietly, for these past 3 days, did you ever once stop to think about how I felt? A simple person in such an expensive hotel. I was worried I couldn't afford to tip, that I didn't know how to act at breakfast, that my clothes were inappropriate. And you knew the whole time that for you, none of it cost a thing. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I am truly sorry. It's not enough. There was a knock on the door. Mr. Sinclair? A voice came from the hallway. The ceremony begins in 1 hour. The press is already arriving. I can manage without you today, Thomas called back. But sir, that's impossible. This is the most important event of the year for the company. I said I'll manage. Megan looked at him with a new understanding. You see, she said quietly, this is your real world. Important events, the press, obligations to your company, and I'm just an adventure on the side. That's not true. Thomas, look at yourself. In an hour, you have to be downstairs in a suit, smiling for pictures with important people. And what about me? Am I supposed to stay up here in this room like a dirty secret? Come with me, he said suddenly. What? To the ceremony. Come with me as my date. Megan looked at him, as if he had lost his mind. Thomas, look at me, she said, gesturing to her simple skirt and blouse. And now look at yourself. These are 2 different worlds. I don't care, but I do, she said quietly. I don't want to be your Pygmalion project. I don't want you to be ashamed of me in front of your friends. I would never be ashamed of you. Really? She looked him straight in the eye. Then why did you pretend to be someone else for 3 days? He didn't answer, because again he had no answer. Megan, he said finally, what can I do to make you forgive me? Tell me the truth, the whole truth. What truth? Was what happened between us real? Do you actually like me, or was it all just a game? He walked over to her and took her hands in his. Megan, he said seriously, for the past 3 days I have felt happier than I have in the last 3 years. When I kiss you, I forget all my problems. When you laugh, the world seems like a better place. I am falling in love with you. You're falling in love with someone who doesn't exist, she replied sadly, with a simple girl who cleans offices and has never seen the ocean. But that girl can't be with a millionaire hotel owner. That story doesn't end well. Why can't she? Because they're different worlds, she said quietly. You belong to a world where people spend more on dinner than I earn in a month, and I belong to a world where every dollar counts. Money isn't everything. For someone who has it, she replied bitterly. But for someone who has worried about it every single day for the last 6 years, it matters. Outside, they could hear voices. Guests were arriving for the ceremony. Thomas, Megan said quietly, I think I should go home. No, he said, pleading. Please stay and let me prove to you that what we have is real. How? I don't know yet, he admitted honestly. But I'll figure something out. Just don't leave, not now. Megan looked at him for a long time. She saw sincere desperation in his eyes, real pain. Maybe he really wasn't lying about his feelings. One more night, she said finally. I'll stay one more night, but tomorrow I'm going home. Thank you, he said with relief. Now go, she gestured to the door. You have responsibilities. Megan, go, Thomas. Leave me alone. I need to think. When he left, Megan sat by the window and watched the preparations for the ceremony. Soon, those chairs would be filled with wealthy people in expensive suits and dresses. They would clap when Thomas, her Thomas, spoke about the success of his company. And she would be sitting in a room upstairs, like Cinderella after the clock struck midnight. Maybe it's for the best, she thought. Maybe fairy tales should stay fairy tales. But an hour later, when she heard Thomas's voice through the window as he addressed the gathered guests, she felt a pang in her heart. It was the voice of a stranger, confident, professional, cool. The voice of a man who had nothing in common with the man who had kissed her on the beach. Downstairs, as he cut the red ribbon with a pair of golden scissors to the applause of the crowd, Thomas was thinking only of the girl in room 221. For the first time in his life, he had everything he wanted in business, and for the first time in his life, he was utterly miserable. Megan couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, listening to the sounds drifting up from the hotel garden, where the post-ceremony reception was still underway. Laughter, the clinking of glasses, music. It all reminded her how different her world was from Thomas's. At midnight the noise died down. Around 1, she heard a soft knock on her door. "Megan." Thomas's voice was quiet, uncertain. "I know you're awake." She didn't answer. "I'm not asking you to open the door," he continued. "I just want to tell you something." She walked to the door and stood just on the other side, without opening it. "I'm listening," she said softly. "Today, during the ceremony, I was only thinking about you," he began. "Everyone was congratulating me on my success, talking about this great achievement, and I just felt like a fraud, because the real success was the moment I first kissed you, and the real achievement was that you started to trust me." Megan rested her forehead against the cool wood of the door. "And I ruined all of it with my own stupidity," he continued. "I know you have every right to hate me, but I want you to know that what I felt during these days was the most beautiful thing in my life." "Thomas," she started. "Let me finish," he interrupted. "You're leaving tomorrow, and we'll probably never see each other again. But before that happens, I want to show you something that might help you understand why I did what I did." "What is it?" "Come out with me tomorrow morning, at dawn, for one last walk. Then I'll drive you to the station myself and never bother you again." Megan was silent for a long time. "Why should I trust you?" "Because you have nothing to lose," he answered honestly. "And maybe it will help you understand that not all rich people are bad people." "Fine," she said at last. "At dawn. But this is really the end." "I understand. Thank you." She heard his footsteps receding down the hall. Only then did she let herself cry. At 5 in the morning, Megan was already dressed. She picked up her small suitcase. She was really leaving today. When she went down to the lobby, Thomas was already waiting. He was wearing the same clothes as the first day, jeans and a simple shirt. He looked tired but determined. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready." Instead of heading to the beach, he led her toward the parking garage. "Are we driving somewhere?" "Not far," he replied, opening the door to a small blue Ford Fiesta. "It's not my car," he added quickly, seeing her look. "I borrowed it from one of the employees." They drove in silence through a still-sleeping Newport, then across the bridge toward Jamestown. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. After 20 minutes, Thomas turned down a narrow street in a quiet neighborhood and stopped in front of a modest, blue-shingled house. "What is this place?" Megan asked. "The house I grew up in," he answered quietly, "before my father made it." They got out of the car. The house was a small 2-story cape with a little yard in the front. Nothing special. A typical working-class family home. "We lived here until I was 20, Thomas said, standing before the gate. "My mom, my dad, and me. Dad ran a small construction company, did renovations, small jobs. My mom was a bookkeeper at a local factory. And you?" "I helped my dad after school and on weekends. I carried bricks, mixed cement, painted fences." He smiled sadly. "I knew the difference between a hammer and a wrench before I learned to ride a bike." Megan looked at the house with new interest. "What happened?" "Dad started getting bigger contracts. He was hard-working, honest, people liked him. Eventually, he bought his first small motel on the coast. It was in terrible shape, but Dad saw potential in it. We spent 2 years renovating it ourselves, the whole family, and it worked out. It worked out so well that 3 years later, he bought a second one. Then a third. In the meantime, I finished business school, the first in our family with a college degree. Dad was so proud." She could hear the pain in his voice. But everything changed when the company started to grow, he continued. We moved to New York, to a big apartment. We started moving in different circles, and suddenly people treated me differently when they knew how much money I had. Differently in what way? Friendships became transactional. Girls flirted with me not because I was funny or handsome, but because I could buy them diamonds. People told me what I wanted to hear, not what they really thought. Megan was beginning to understand. And that's why you hid who you were? Yes, he nodded. When I met you for the first time in years, someone told me honestly what they thought of me. You said I was kind. Not because you wanted money from me, but because you actually thought so. But Thomas, she said softly, you can't spend your whole life pretending to be someone you're not. I know, he admitted, and I don't want to, but I want someone in my life who loves me, not my wallet. They stood in front of his childhood home as the sun rose fully. In the distance, a ferry horn blew. Megan, Thomas said, turning to her, if I were the same guy you met, but without the money, could you love me? But you're not without the money, she replied. It's a hypothetical question. Megan looked at him for a long time. Yes, she said finally. I could. I was already falling for you before I knew about the money. Then maybe the money doesn't have to change everything. But it does, she said sadly. It changes everything. Your world, my world, people's expectations. What if it doesn't have to? What do you mean? Thomas reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. What's this? Open it. Inside the envelope was a check for an amount that took her breath away. It would be enough to cover her grandmother's care for the next 10 years, to finish college, to live without a worry in the world. Thomas, I can't accept this, she said quickly, trying to hand the check back. It's not charity, he said calmly. It's an investment. In what? In you, in your education, in your future. If you want to be a teacher, then go be a teacher. I'll cover the cost of tuition and living expenses. And what do you want in return? Nothing, he replied. No strings attached, regardless of whether you ever decide to see me again. Megan stared at him in disbelief. Why? Because I believe in you. Because I see how smart, ambitious, and good you are. Because this world needs more teachers like you. This is too much. For you, but not for me, he said honestly. Megan, what for you is a life-changing amount. For me is a small fraction of my annual income. But if it makes at least one person in the world happier, it will be the best money I've ever spent. But I don't want to be your charity project. This isn't charity, he said firmly. This is my attempt to square my accounts with the world. For years I've been taking. Now I want to give something back. Megan held the check in her trembling hands. And if I accept it, what does that mean for us? Nothing, he answered. It will mean whatever you want it to mean. If you decide you never want to see me again, I will respect that. If you decide you want to be my friend, I'll be the happiest man in the world. And if you decide you want to give me a chance to prove I can be the man you fell for, then what? Then I will spend every day trying to be worthy of it, he finished quietly. They stood in silence for a long moment. Megan looked at the check, then at Thomas, then at the modest house where he grew up. Thomas, she said finally, if you didn't have money, would you still want to be with me? Yes. And if I had money, would you still want to be with me? Yes. Then maybe the problem isn't the money, but us? What do you mean? That we're both afraid of being rejected. You're afraid people only love your money. I'm afraid I'm not good enough for someone like you. Thomas looked at her with a new understanding. You're right, he said quietly. We're both scared. So maybe it's time to stop being scared. What are you suggesting? Megan looked at the check, then put it in her purse. I accept, she said, but not as your girlfriend, as your friend who wants to become a teacher. And what about us? And we... She smiled for the first time since yesterday. We start over. No lies, no hiding, no pretending to be someone else. Start over. Hi! She held out her hand to him. "My name is Megan Taylor. I clean offices, take care of my sick grandmother, and dream of becoming a teacher. It's very nice to meet you." Thomas smiled for the first time in 2 days and shook her hand. "Hi, my name is Thomas Sinclair. I own hotels, sometimes have too much money and not enough real friends. I come from a working-class family, and it's very nice to meet you." "And now," Megan said, "could we maybe go back to the hotel? I need to call my grandmother and tell her my trip might last a little longer than planned." "You're staying?" "For a little while," she nodded, "but this time as myself, not as your secret. And can I be myself too?" "You have to be," she replied firmly. "Millionaire or not, as my partner, you have to be authentic." "Partner? If you behave yourself," she smiled playfully. As they drove back to the hotel, they both felt that this was truly a new beginning. Not the end of a fairy tale, but the start of a real story. Because real stories are always more complicated than fairy tales, but also much more beautiful. The radio was playing in the car, the sun was shining over the Atlantic, and for the first time in her life, Megan felt that her future could be whatever she wanted it to be. And for the first time in his life, Thomas felt that his money could be a tool for doing good, not a barrier between him and the world. Sometimes second chances are better than first meetings. 12 months later, Megan stood in front of the mirror in the small apartment she rented near Boston College, trying to calm her shaking hands. Today was the defense of her bachelor's thesis in education, and next week was her first day as a teacher at an elementary school in the Boston suburbs. On her desk lay a bouquet of white roses with a card. "Good luck. I'll be rooting for you. T. Thomas." Over the past year, their relationship had gone through every possible phase, from distrust to friendship to slowly rebuilt trust and something more. It hadn't been easy. The first few months were mostly long phone conversations. Megan had returned to Boston to arrange a better apartment for her grandmother and handle the formalities of enrolling in school. Thomas called every evening, told her about his day, asked about her progress, and listened patiently as she complained about the difficulty of catching up on her studies. He never pushed for meetings. He never leveraged the fact that he was funding her education. He was just there. When she finally moved to a new place near campus, at the beginning of the academic year, they met in a small coffee shop. They were both as shy as teenagers on a first date. "You look nice," he said as she sat down across from him. "Thanks," she replied, nervously fixing her hair. "You too." For a moment they sat in silence, sipping their coffee. "This is weird," she finally said. "What is?" "That we've known each other for so long, and yet not at all." "Maybe that's because this time we both know who we really are," he replied. And indeed, this time everything was different. Thomas didn't pretend to be a regular guy. Megan didn't feel inferior because of her background. They talked about everything, her studies, his work, books, movies, dreams, but also about the difficulties. "Sometimes I feel like I'm living in two worlds," she confessed to him one evening as they walked through Boston Common. "During the day, I'm studying with friends who count every dollar for lunch, and in the evening, I go back to an apartment that you're paying for. Does that bother you?" "Yes," she answered honestly, "because I don't know who I am in this situation. Am I the girl who's making her own way, or someone living off someone else's dime? Or maybe you're just someone who was given a chance and is making the most of it," he suggested gently. "Maybe," she admitted, "but sometimes I'm afraid I'll get used to it, that I'll start to think I'm entitled to it, and I'm afraid you won't let me care for you," he replied. "That you'll always see me as a stranger helping you out of pity." It was the most honest conversation they had ever had. And from that moment on, something between them changed. They started seeing each other more often, not just for dinners at expensive restaurants. Megan taught Thomas how to enjoy food trucks and go to afternoon movie matinees. He showed her a side of the city she never knew, private galleries, small theaters, places where you could talk about art until morning. The first kiss in a year happened 3 months ago, on a bench in the public garden. It was gentle, uncertain, as if they were both afraid of destroying what they had so slowly built. "Does this mean you forgive me?" he asked when they pulled apart. "It means I want to try to be happy," she replied. And from that day on, they really tried. It wasn't perfect. Sometimes they argued about money. Sometimes Megan felt overwhelmed by his world. Sometimes Thomas didn't understand her fears. But they talked about everything, hid nothing, and didn't pretend to be anyone else. Now, a year after their first meeting in Newport, Megan finally felt that she knew who she was and what she wanted. The defense went smoothly. The committee was impressed with her thesis on the role of literature in shaping empathy in children. When she walked out of the room with her bachelor's degree in hand, the first person she called was her grandmother. "Grandma, I passed. I have my degree." "I knew you would, sweetheart," her grandmother said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm so proud of you. Your parents would be too." "I know," Megan said, feeling tears of joy in her eyes. "I know." The second person was Thomas. "How did it go?" he asked immediately. "It went great," she replied. "I have a job, I have a degree, I have a future." "And do you have me?" he asked quietly. "That depends," she replied, smiling, though he couldn't see it. "On what?" "On whether you'd like to have dinner with a brand new teacher who is going to treat you to pizza and then talk your ear off about her future students all afternoon." "Sounds perfect," he laughed. "I'll pick you up in an hour." But when he arrived, he brought not only a bouquet of flowers, but also a small envelope. "What's this?" she asked suspiciously. "A graduation present," he replied. "Thomas, we've talked about this. It's not money," he assured her quickly. "Open it." Inside the envelope were 2 plane tickets to Providence and a reservation at a small, family-owned inn in Newport. "I thought maybe we should go back to where it all began," he said uncertainly. "But this time as us, the real us." Megan looked at the tickets and felt a warmth spread through her chest. "That's a beautiful idea," she said softly. "Really, really." 3 days later, they stood on the same beach as a year ago, but everything was different. They were themselves, without masks, without lies, without hiding. Megan in a simple sundress, Thomas in regular jeans, both of them happy and at peace. "Remember how you panicked at the sight of the ocean?" he asked as they walked along the shore. "I remember," she smiled. "And do you remember how you tried to tell me about your job at the construction firm?" "I'd rather not," he laughed. "I was terrible at lying." "You were," she agreed. Thankfully, they stopped at the spot where they had first kissed a year ago. "Megan," Thomas said seriously, "I have a question for you." "I'm listening." "Do you think we can be happy, truly happy, despite all the differences, all the problems, all the complications?" Megan looked at the ocean that had terrified her so much a year ago. Now it seemed calm, friendly, beautiful. "I think happiness isn't a state you achieve and then have forever," she said finally. "It's something you have to work on every single day." "And do you want to work on it?" "With me?" "I do," she answered without hesitation. "But I have conditions." "What are they?" "No more lies, no more pretending. And if I ever feel like you're treating me like a charity project instead of an equal partner, I'm gone." "I agree to all of it," he said quickly. "And I have a condition for myself," she added. "What is it?" "That I'll stop being afraid. That I'll enjoy what I have instead of worrying that I'm not good enough for you." "You are more than good enough," he said softly. "You're perfect." "I'm not perfect," she laughed. "I'm just a normal girl who sometimes burns dinner, forgets anniversaries, and is obsessed with proper grammar. And that's exactly why I love you," he said. "And I love you," she replied. "Despite the fact that you have too much money, are sometimes overprotective, and are completely incapable of folding laundry." "I have a housekeeper for that," he protested. "You won't when I move in with you," she replied playfully. "You're moving in with me." "Maybe," she smiled, "if you ask nicely." "Megan Taylor," he said solemnly, taking her hands in his. "Would you do me the honor of moving into my apartment? putting up with my quirks, correcting my grammar, and making me a better person every single day. Sounds like a lot of work, she considered theatrically. But the compensation is good, he laughed. In that case, she kissed him gently. I accept. As the sun set over the Atlantic, they stood wrapped in each other's arms, looking at the ocean that had brought them together a year ago. The ocean that had taught them that love isn't a fairy tale, but daily work, trust, and the desire to be better for another person. Thomas, Megan said quietly. Yes? The next time you fall in love with someone, tell the truth right away. Next time? He laughed. I plan on staying in love with you for the rest of my life. That's more like it, she murmured, holding him tighter. And the ocean whispered just as it had a year ago, but it no longer frightened them. It was the soundtrack to their new, real story. Because real love stories aren't the ones that end with, and they lived happily ever after, but the ones that begin with, they decided to work at being happy every single day. And sometimes, quite often, they succeeded. 5 years later, Megan Sinclair, née Taylor, stood in front of her third-grade class, reading them a story about a princess and a frog. When one of the little girls asked if love like that really exists, Megan smiled and said, "Real love does exist. But it's different from fairy tales. It's harder, but it's also more beautiful. Because real people aren't princes and princesses, they're just ordinary people who decide to be extraordinary for each other." And that evening when she came home, Thomas, who still sometimes burned dinner and forgot to fold the laundry, kissed her hello and asked her how her day was. And that was exactly as extraordinary as real love ought to be.